All right, welcome to Ethan Skolnick Starting Nine. Sorry about that. Was not expecting that to come here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. Our producer today is Manny Chang. I'll be with you until 9:30. Our guest is Ricky J. Mark, and he will be joining us to talk about the Miami Heat. We thought about talking about the Miami Dolphins today. Of course, the trade deadline is at 4 o'clock, and it was considered, should we get into the Deshaun Watson thing again? But I think everybody is absolutely sick of it at this stage. And so we're just going to see how that plays out by 4. And then we're going to meet tonight at Dangerous Minds Brewing. Manny's going to be there as well, I believe, right? We've gotten to come up to the other county. We're going to be at Dangerous Minds Brewing. That is in Pompano Beach on the corner of Copans and Federal. It's a big parking lot. It's where the J. Marks is. I think they had a movie theater there at one time. I actually think it was the former home of the Dollhouse. Not that I ever actually was there, although it wasn't a Motley Crue song. And so we're going to be there tonight starting at 7. Heat Dallas at 7:30, and then we'll just sort of hang out. So we've got some free beer. Well, maybe not a lot of free beer. We got beer specials. We got free pizza. I don't like giving away free beer because then I'm responsible for what happens after. But we're going to do beer specials, and then we're going to do some free pizza. If you get there early enough, there'll be some there for you. And then additionally, we're going to give away some of those 5 Reasons Sports hats. I've got some T-shirts as well. We're just going to have a good time. And we are not going to be blamed if the Heat lose tonight because they typically do lose in Dallas. This is why I picked these 2 games for the watch parties. We've got Dallas tonight, and we've got Denver next week. That's with another of our sponsors, Quarter Deck, and that's going to be at the Quarter Deck in Sunrise. So after about a year and a half, or a little more than that, we are back doing watch parties, which I know some people sorry about that. Some people are not thrilled about because, again, we were a bit of a jinx. But the Heat did win in Milwaukee during a watch party that we went to at GQ's Craft House without Jimmy Butler. That was early in the season that they ended up going to the finals. So I don't think we're as big a jinx as people think. All right, we are sponsored today, not just by Dangerous Minds, but also by Underdog Fantasy. This is where you've got to go if you want to do some drafts, on sort of NFL nights, NBA nights. You can do like 3-player drafts, 4-player drafts, 6-player drafts, 12-player drafts, all kinds of different drafts. But here's the key thing about Underdog Fantasy. If you use the code 5RSN, that's 5RSN, they'll give you $10, okay? Most of the games on there are $3 or $5. So, you have nothing to lose. Just use the code 5RSN. That's the code 5RSN in Underdog Fantasy. Download the app. Do it on the website as well. And when you do that, again, they're going to hand you $10, and then just see if there's a couple of $5 games that you want to play just to get the hang of it. It's a lot of fun. They do the props there as well, which I know a lot of the other fantasy sites do. And again, they do best ball during the season. And here's the great thing about Underdog Fantasy. Also, you don't have to change your lineups all the time. It's like once you do it and you're done. And they do the head-to-heads and all kinds of cool stuff. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com, UnderdogFantasy.com. Use that code 5RSN. We're going to be setting up some nightly drafts with our NBA group as we go forward. And you're going to want to be part of those. So make sure that you're signed up using that code. Get your $10, and then when we're ready to go on Twitter, you're ready to play. All right, let's get to it. Again, I do not want to talk Dolphins today. Just don't. Sorry. I'm hoping at 4 o'clock they just go back to being a team that we don't have to care about until next year, honestly. So we're going to talk about the Heat. And look, it's one thing to say a team is off to a good start. All right? Plenty of Heat teams have gotten off to good starts. Some of the best Heat teams have not gotten off to good starts. I mean, the 2010-2011 team, we know, started 9-8, bump gate. Dallas meeting with Dwayne Wade stands up. We're waiting for an hour outside the locker room. They went to the finals. I know they didn't win because LeBron and Mike Bibby and all the rest, but they got to the finals. And they started 9-8. The Heat team that won the championship in 2005-2006, remember that one? Well, that one didn't start very well. I believe it was 20-19 or something along those lines. Maybe it was less than that. I'm thinking maybe of a Cleveland team in 2014-15. But they didn't start very well. They were 500 when Stan, I don't know what you want to say about that, went home to spend more time with his family. There was a lot going on behind the scenes there, okay? Some reported, some not reported. And that team, Pat Riley became the head coach. They got it together a little bit because they ended up sort of playing a worse schedule when Pat came back, and also Shaq came back around that time, convenient timing. And, the Heat went on a bit of a run. They got into the postseason. They still weren't favored. Remember, Detroit was really the favorite in the East at that point. And they got into and then they were 2-2 against Chicago in the first round. And I was at the United Center when Gary Payton and Dwayne Wade were screaming at each other on the court. And then Dwayne went nuclear for like 6 weeks, and they won a championship. So you don't have to get off to a great start. The team that made the finals a couple of years ago, they got off to a better start than expected by most people. I liked that team before the year, but a lot of people didn't. I had them at a 3 seed before the season. They actually finished as a 5 seed. Remember, they dropped that game to Indiana in the bubble, but then they ended up making the finals. So the start is not always indicative of where you finish. I covered the Heat's teams in the late 90s. And there was one year, I think it was 99, 2000, that they just were rip-roaring from the very beginning. I mean, their offense looked great. And that was a great defensive team. But there was a lot of talk about how that offseason, they changed some things on offense. They pushed the tempo a little bit more. Sound familiar? Tim Hardaway was getting the ball out, and they looked great. I think they started like 16 or 17-4. But it didn't end well anyway because they lost to the Knicks again for the third straight postseason when it went the maximum games in the series. So the start is not always indicative of how you finish. But damn, this looks good, doesn't it? And here's why the start is so encouraging. Because when you go into a season, you want to see certain things play out the way you expect them to in a positive way, but then you want a couple of other things to pop in a way you didn't expect. So what was expected? Well, that this team was going to be hellacious defensively, right? Like we all thought that. Like, I mean, even the national people who don't tend to give the Heat a lot of credit were saying, well, the Heat could be a top 5 defense this year, right? Like, I mean, it was obvious. You're replacing Dragic with Lowry, right? Which takes care of your problem having too many bad defenders on the floor at the same time. Because Dragic, you wanted him to play, but you couldn't play him with some other bad defenders or subpar defenders. I'm going to say bad, but not elite defenders, and still have a good defense. You just couldn't. But you can play Lowry with them, right? And you added P.J. Tucker, which solved another huge problem from last year. They didn't get Trevor Ariza until halfway through the season. And even then, and I thought Trevor did a good job for them, but Trevor's not a physical player, which meant they had problems finishing possessions because they couldn't rebound. You're not going to rebound well with Trevor Ariza as your starting power forward. You're just not. Or Mo Harkless. Okay? So we knew they would be better from a defensive perspective this year. They would be able to finish possessions. They'd be better at the point of attack. They'd be able to switch just about everything. They wouldn't have to play as much zone. These are all things we knew, right? Like nobody who's watching this, who follows me or follows Five on the Floor, follows any of the Heat outlets locally, okay, thought that they were going to be an average defense. Everybody thought they'd be a good defense, right? Now, maybe not this good from the start, but if you thought they'd be good, okay? So that, you expected it, it's happened. That's great, okay? What else did you expect? Well, you expected Jimmy Butler to come back refreshed. Because, remember, this guy carried through the bubble into the finals without the other 2 best players on the team when it mattered, right? And then he had no break. And then last year he had no help. And they were awful with him off the floor last year. Awful. His splits, I mean, when they were a pretty good team when he was playing. When he wasn't playing, they were like a lottery team. So he had an offseason. He played a lot of tennis. He relaxed. He refreshed, right? You knew Jimmy would come back good. This good? I don't know, okay? He's putting up LeBron numbers. I mean, seriously, look at them. We talked about this on Five on the Floor. He's putting up LeBron in Miami numbers. He's getting you 24, 7, and 7, roughly, on very efficient shooting. And he's shooting close to 90% from the line. Again, I'm a LeBron guy. He never did that. And by the way, he's defending better than LeBron did most of the time in Miami. LeBron could be tremendous defensively, but it depended on his mood. With Jimmy, it doesn't depend on his mood. He's defending, right? He's been tremendous. So, you expected him to be refreshed. Outcome, positive, but even better than you expected. Okay, you expected Bam to come back more aggressive. It's happened, right? I mean, not every moment of every game. There are still times that frustrate you, but there are also some sequences he's just taking over on both ends. He's better again. Like he was better last year than the year before. Like he was better the year before than he was the year before that. He gets better. That's what he does in this program. Again, expected, good development that it actually happened. Tyler Hero, okay? Now, yes, there was talk of trading him this offseason. I reported it. All right? I still think down the road, if that guy, I mean, if Lillard ever makes another shot, but if that guy, Lillard, Beal, whatever, then it'll be entertained. Don't kid yourself, okay? But we also talked during the offseason on Five on the Floor that they were creating the conditions for Tyler Hero to succeed, either to be a long-term part of their program, which may end up being more likely now, or to be that piece that they can move. How are they creating those conditions? Well, A, they got on him about getting in the gym. And I'm not talking about shooting basketball. I'm talking about putting weight on. And he did, to his credit. Okay? What else? They cleared the path for him. They could have re-signed Kendrick Nunn. Okay, now I know some of this is luxury tax related. No question. Okay, I'm not stupid. Well, some people think I am. But in this particular case, I'm not. They could have retained Kendrick Nunn and paid the tax. They could have done it. Again, you can make a case that they should have done it, maybe. I know Kendrick has been hurt, but whatever. But one of the reasons they did not do it was they did not want to progress stop Hero. Because Kendrick Nunn's upside is limited. We know he's older, okay? I don't know how much better he's going to get, but Tyler, there was a chance for him to get much better. So why re-sign the guy that's going to split the bench with him, and why not just turn the bench over to Tyler? It also allowed you to give Strus an opportunity, a bigger player, a more physical defensive player. By the way, good news on Max Strus. Looks like it's only going to be a couple of weeks for him, maybe 3, but it's not going to be long term. So by clearing out Nunn, Dragic going the other direction for Lowry, you handed Tyler Hero a very specific but necessary responsibility. Run the bench. Right? I mean, none of the stuff like last year in the starting lineup, yanked out of the starting lineup, you're a point guard, you're not a point guard, whatever. This year, clear. Come off the bench and score. Right? So you thought it would be better. And it is. But it's even better than you expected. And then Eric Spoelstra. You knew if he got his hands on a team like this, okay, which is a Pat Riley team. Again, let's not kid ourselves. Pat's been gushing. Why? Because he basically built his team from the late 90s. Okay? And he did it at the right time, too. You know why? Something that hasn't been talked about a lot. But if I get another chance to talk to Riley about this, I will. Did they decide to build this kind of team because of the rule changes? Nobody's really discussed that, right? But the rule changes now where guys aren't getting to the line as easily, right? The officials aren't calling everything they used to call. James Harden, Dame Lillard, these guys are struggling with it. Well, you built a more physical defensive team for that. The rules are kind of going back a little bit. Your team goes back a little bit. It's interesting. I don't know if that was planned, and I'm going to find out, but it was smart. So Spoelstra. You knew if you gave him time with a team like this, he would figure it out, right? And he has. But it's been even better, right? I mean, they've come out of the gates rolling. They've lost one game, and they'll win that game if Lowry plays. I mean, they should have won it anyway. They took it to overtime. So all of that stuff has been good, but even better than expected. And then what else is happening now? Well, Markieff Morris is getting in shape, right? PJ Tucker is fit in perfectly with what you're trying to do. I know Duncan. People are going to mention Duncan. We're in 3 weeks, and nobody's going to. Again, you saw him come out of it a little bit the other day. Nobody's going to be talking about Duncan anymore. And here's the one thing. Could people stop with the let's put Tyler Hero on the starting lineup and put Duncan on the bench? Do you understand how teams work? I mean, I don't mean to be condescending here, but I mean, it's one of the stupidest arguments that's out there right now. Tyler is flourishing in his role, right? You put Tyler in the starting lineup where Jimmy and Bam are taking the lead and Lowry is handling the ball. It's too much. Tyler's going to be he's going to be either force the action or he's going to be relegated to the side, right? And you don't get the spacing in the starting lineup because as good a shooter as Tyler can be, he does not come with the reputation for a distant shooter as Duncan Robinson does. I mean, again, look at their numbers last season. You're talking 31% versus 40%. Okay? Tyler Hero is where he belongs right now. Now, in the future, maybe, different construction of the team, Tyler Hero becomes a starter again. I understand that. There may be games in the postseason you want to do that. What's wrong with what they're doing now? So let's stop with that, okay? What we're going to do in a second is we're going to start with Ricky J. Mark because we're going to talk to him about where this team kind of fits and what starts mean. But before we do, I want to tell you about another sponsor, 5 Reasons Sports Network. I can tell you about this one on 5 on the floor all the time. It's our friends over at everythingtradeshows.com. Maybe you run a business or maybe you just want to suck up to the boss. This is where you need to go if you're starting to go back to trade shows. They're starting to pop up at convention centers all over the country. Right now, you can see the great work that they do there. They do all kinds of booth builds for you from like soup to nuts. From the beginning to the end, they'll show you exactly how you get the right booth and how you attract people, whether it's better to rent or buy or all this. They give you all kinds of different options. And here's the thing. They'll do that for free. They'll do a free booth rendering for you. Here's all the companies that they've worked with. Manny just will scroll through them. I mean, serious stuff here. And they're right here on Las Olas, but they service all 50 states, okay, everywhere. All right? Our guy Chris Chase is like traveling the country right now, going to cool trade shows. Actually, I wouldn't mind doing that. Everythingtradeshows.com is where you want to go. Again, they do all kinds of different booths. You can see the 10x10s and more. They do bigger, and they do all kinds of different styles. And again, if you mention 5 Reasons, they'll do a free booth rendering for you. There's the 10x20s, and they'll show you exactly how it is supposed to look. All right, so here's what you got to do. Again, if you run a business, I mean, you're going to be at trade shows, right? You got to get out in front of people again, right? I mean, mask, no mask, whatever, vaccinated. Trade shows are happening, okay? So go to everythingtradeshows.com, everythingtradeshows.com. Again, reach out, mention 5 Reasons, ask for Chris. They got a great crew down here, again, right off of Las Olas, and they'll handle all 50 states for you. All right, we're going to bring on our guy now, Ricky J. Mark. You can find him, conveniently enough, at Ricky J. Mark. Good to see you, sir. Appreciate you joining me this morning. Good morning. I'm going through sort of the expectation game for this Heat team before the year, and I know you liked this team. I liked this team. I think the question, again, was how quickly it was going to come together, and my issue was a little bit more like, were they more of a playoff proposition than they were a regular season team? Because there's some age on the roster, and it's a little thin, or so we thought. Now, I feel like Eric Spoelstra is like speaking directly to me and others when he's been saying the past couple of days, we saw our depth as a strength, but I can understand, I think most people understood why we thought it might be a weakness. I mean, they're not using certain roster spots, okay, either because they literally don't want to pay the tax, or they've got a guy who's, hasn't really played the last 4 years, or a guy who's not going to play until February, and a guy who doesn't look like he would play very well in the G League. So, like, you've got 4 roster spots that are just kind of dead spots. But they have managed to build a rotation anyway that looks clean and strong. And, you pause a little bit when Strus gets hurt because then you get a little bit thinner. But for you, has this come together, before we kind of put into historical context and how teams start sort of play out the rest of the year, has this come together quicker than you expected?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought that the first 20 games were going to be almost the kind of feeling out process that you're seeing over in LA right now, where they're struggling to beat, you could argue, mediocre teams. This Heat team has come together very quickly, and I think we should have seen that coming based on some of the performances we saw in preseason. Some of the guys looked like they were in midseason form. I know Jimmy, Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry just came in and didn't even skip a beat. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay. All right, that I have reason to have confidence in this team, especially compared to what they put up last season.
You talk about Lowry and the fit here, and we talk about the things that have lived up to expectations or not. I didn't even mention him when I was going through kind of that scroll of other guys, and in some ways he has exceeded expectations. I think for people who didn't really understand what he brings to a team, which is, and what this team has been missing for, I mean, honestly, decades at this stage. But in terms of the playmaking, the ability to make others better, the ability to control pace, the ability to kind of at least slow guys enough defensively, whether it's with the old man tricks or whatever it is that you're doing, so that it doesn't become chaos that then Bam and Jimmy need to cover up for, and they can just play their roles. But there is still upside here. I mean, that's the thing. Like, he's not, until the last game, he hasn't shot the ball well. He hasn't even really looked for his shot. And the thing is, like, there's a track record. Like, the shooting is the last thing for him that's gonna go. Like, I feel like he's still gonna be a good shooter this year, right? So when you look at like upside factors, like what could make this team even better? Is Lowry's offensive play, and I don't mean the playmaking, but the scoring, one of them? And what are the others?
I think it's a combination of things. You have Lowry's offensive production. You have, matter of fact, here, let me give you an example. Just over the weekend, right before Strus got hurt, and thankfully it wasn't worse, you had Strus, Duncan Robinson, and Tyler Hero having relatively solid shooting nights. And this was without Bam getting nearly a 20 and 20. Now, there is going to be a day or a night in which Markieff Morris has a good game. The shooters have good games. Lowry is aggressive. Butler is out of this world. And Bam is on another platform or on another level. On a day like that, they can beat anyone. Anyone from the Lakers to the Bucks. Oh, well, we saw the Bucks to anyone. Now, I'm reminded a little bit of how it all came together for another veteran team about 15 years ago. How there were some ups and downs, and then they were able to get it all together because a lot of them were veterans and they understood the gravity of the situation. That 05-06 Heat team. I think the potential of this team is very much like that one night when they absolutely blew out Utah during a regular season game. It's scary. It's scary. So, and this goes without even mentioning the quote-unquote mid-season addition, potentially, of Victor Oladipo and a potential third buyout candidate, whoever it is.
Well, and there's a couple options there. I mean, it could be a John Wall. I don't know that Houston's going to spend the money to buy him out, but we'll see. And then I mentioned yesterday there is the possibility. I don't even know if you want to throw this back in the mix at this stage, but Dragic is getting DNP CDs in Toronto. If he's traded, my understanding is, I know they're saying otherwise on Twitter, but my understanding, Adam's understanding, is that if he is traded to another team and then bought out, he could sign him this season. That rule about waiting a year does not apply. But again, I don't even know at this stage. I mean, I would love to have Dragic back, but at this stage, it's like, do you really put him on the bench with Hero if you got Oladipo coming back? But let's get into, we talked about historical. You mentioned the 05-06 team. Pat has mentioned that team a couple times recently in terms of, thank you for the contribution and thank you for saying that we have the best Heat content. We appreciate that. But the thing about it is, when you look at the 05-06 team, it didn't come together this quickly. Like we talk about, what happened there. It really didn't happen until 2-2 against Chicago in the first round.
Yep.
I mean, they got better in the second half of the year under Pat, no question, because Shaq came back, and they did have these kind of gruff veterans, which is similar to this team in a lot of different ways. And Pat, I think he talked about the presser. He identified those kind of players this offseason. He wanted that kind of attitude that the team last year didn't have. But even so, like, they didn't beat anybody during the regular season. Like, you mentioned the Utah game. I remember that. But, like, there were a lot of, I remember one of the narratives, and I covered that team. One of the narratives of that team was they didn't beat anybody good during the year. Like, they were like, they had like 3 wins against like, teams that were like in the top 4 seeds of the 2 conferences. And that was it. Like, they were like,
it was the opposite of the last season.
Exactly. They didn't beat anybody. This team feels like, and again, I understand that Brooklyn doesn't have Kyrie. At a certain point, we just got to say Brooklyn doesn't have Kyrie. Like, he's not a part of the team. Right. It's don't.
Over.
Right.
He thinks he's Morpheus. It's over.
Exactly. Okay, so that's one, all right? And if they play Philadelphia and they don't have Simmons, it's the same thing, okay? At a certain point, your team is what it is constructed as until they make a move, and I haven't even heard anything on that lately. And then you look at the situation in Milwaukee, that's the one. I understand. They did not have Drew. They did not have Brook. That does change the way that they play, and those guys are back. So it's different there, okay? But I don't feel like this team goes into a game against the better teams in the league and it's like they can't compete with them. And there have been Heat teams, and even, like you said, even that 05-06 team. it didn't look like they could really compete during the first half of the season, and even when Riley came back. So that's more promising. Let's look then at what that means. They're in Dallas tonight, a place they don't typically win, right? Well, that's a thin roster behind Luka. They've got Denver coming up Monday night, our next watch party. Place they don't typically win against a very, very good team, even though they don't have Jamal back. They've got Utah coming up on Saturday night. I mean, we're going to learn a lot in the next week, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we'll learn a little bit about this team, but I know some people might be treating this as hedging your bet. But look, there are two things to look at with regards to what's coming up. One, it's early; it's the beginning of the season. The Heat team that we're dealing with right now is not going to be the Heat team that we see in April and May. It could be better, it could be worse, but that remains to be seen. Of course, we'll have to tune in to pregame and postgame shows on the Five Reasons Sports Network.
I would
to
agree
find
with
that
that.
out.
Yes, right.
That's one. Two, based on the way this Heat team's been playing, both with and without Bam, and even to a small extent without Kyle Lowry, I could see them winning those games too. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm reminded of when this Heat team was able to field a competent roster in 2009, 2010, I believe. No, or 2008, 2009, when they actually went in and ended the curse in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a competent team around them. Now, yeah, we know what the history is with all that and everything, but it wouldn't surprise me if Miami went into Denver and won. I mean, this is a Denver team that struggled to beat the Minnesota Timberwolves
Yeah.
just the other day. I mean, they got lucky. It was a block at the end, and they weren't able to execute. Look, this Heat team is not like old Heat teams. They're not the type that'll just go in and then just give up. This is a team that will fight you till the very end. And
Well,
if Denver's not ready,
isn't that in part, Ricky, because
mm,
I think a lot of that is because of the way they treat each other,
mhm.
which feels very positive to start this season. Like you get a sense of a team, and there's the whole argument: does winning lead to chemistry or chemistry lead to winning? But the fact that there are pre-existing friendships and relationships on this team, and the relationship that Jimmy and Kyle has, I feel like is going to set the tone for this team because they are best friends and they go at each other. And
Mhm.
I feel like if you have that at the top, then like everybody else can't. It's like Jimmy said, like nobody gets offended because like if Jimmy is trashing Kyle and vice versa, and you know that one is the godfather of the other's child, right? Like then it's harder to take offense. And I do feel like what Jimmy said the other day about Duncan, out of nowhere calling him the dumbest guy on the team. There's a method to Jimmy's madness. He doesn't do things just to do them. I
Mhm.
felt like as I sat there, like literally in the press conference room, I'm like, okay, he's trying to get Duncan to loosen up. Like that to me, that's what that was about. And so I just feel like they have this very now. We'll see. I've seen games in Denver and Dallas, and I've sat courtside when things have gone the other way and guys are yelling at each other, and it's not positive. But including that 9-8 game in 2010. Okay,
Mhm.
we were sitting right there. We knew there was going to be a problem before there was the bump. I was sitting there with Mike Wallace, and I'm like, this is not good. Okay, they look like they never met each other before. Okay, so this stuff can happen on the road, but I don't feel like it's going to. Like, Rick, I don't feel like they're gonna like start to like fall apart mentally in these games. They might get beat because Luka's really good and Jokic is really good, whatever. But I don't feel like this team's going to mentally collapse.
No, I don't think so. I think those days are over. If this team were to somehow collapse, it would have to be because somebody was caught with somebody's significant other or something,
Yeah.
something completely unexpected. This team is a very tight knit team. I mean, I'll give you another example to kind of build on the point you just made earlier. I think it was preseason. Markieff Morris almost like he almost committed a catastrophe. He almost missed a layup or something like that. And what was happening on the very next play or the very next stoppage of play down? You saw Jimmy Butler mocking the way he was walking on the way to that basket. Markieff Morris, we all know the Morris twins. They're not the type that are all about kikiing and whatnot. But
Right.
if you look at Markieff, he was yucking it up.
Yeah.
He was cracking up about it. This
Right.
team is a tight knit team because everyone respects what the others, one another does. And I'll just add this final point: it might be a Butler Lowry hierarchy, But I think it's very possible that at this point, based on what we've seen out of Bam in the last few games, it
Yeah.
might be Butler, Bam,
Yeah.
Lowry, or even Bam, Butler, Lowry as we move forward. And if that is the case, then we have our big three. Roll the ball out. Let's go. We can
Well,
go up
Ricky,
against anybody.
that's what it seems like Kyle and Jimmy want. And
Mhm.
we have said this repeatedly. Like, there are others, like I said, Tyler could lead the team in scoring and all the rest of this. All of this stuff is good, but they all want all of this to be Bam. Ultimately, if
Mhm.
Bam takes the lead from an offensive perspective, from a leadership perspective, that is good. Okay, that because he is your franchise cornerstone going forward. Okay, he is of your young players. He is the guy. He's the guy who's going to be entering his prime in the next 3 or 4 years. He got paid. He handles it properly. He is the face of your franchise ultimately. So you want that. But for this team specifically, too, if he becomes a top 10 guy, which I believe he has the potential to be on that back end of the top 10, okay, not too
Easily.
far from it. Exactly. If that happens with the leadership, with the aggressiveness, as he grows into this, then that is the best possible thing for this franchise. It doesn't mean Jimmy can't be Jimmy. It doesn't mean Kyle can't continue to do the things Kyle does. But that ultimately is the best thing for you. And you do feel it, and you feel it coming back together. I also think, and this is just, this is one thing, and if you followed our content, you know this, the Tyler-Jimmy relationship was a little strained last year. And just being around a little bit this year, I can tell it's better. You can see it on the court. You can tell. Again, we don't need to get into the specifics of why, but it was strained and it is better now. And so it's all positive, Ricky. All right, before we let you go, and again, thanks to our sponsors, UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the code 5RSN. Of course, everythingtradeshows.com. Give me the one team in the NBA right now that you're still eyeing. Like, in other words, maybe they haven't gotten off to the best start, but you think it could come together here shortly.
Well, I feel like the easy answer would be the Lakers
Mm.
because, they've had their moments here and there, a couple third quarters, a couple stretch runs and everything. I imagine once Vogel figures out the proper lineups and maybe even gets one more person, like as crazy as that might sound, they'll be right there in the end. I mean, I've got them winning the title this season, but
Mm.
other than them, worth looking at. See, I'd say don't sleep on the Bulls, but their bench depth is
Yeah.
concerning.
Do you take Utah seriously? Because we're going to see them on Saturday, and I know they're good. Like, nobody
Nah,
questions whether they're good, but to me,
no.
they have a ceiling. Like, I don't feel like they're gonna. I don't know. It doesn't
Look,
feel like
your
they
your
get past that.
your second best player, or at least your second most famous player, gets played off the court
I
in
know.
the playoffs in Rudy Gobert. And look, I got love for my Frenchies, but nah, the Jazz won't get past the conference finals if they get that far. No matter what Dwayne teaches Donovan Mitchell, it's just not going to happen. I don't see it.
Yeah,
They had the
I
chance to do it last year, and
I
they
know,
didn't.
and they probably should have done it last year, and they won't. So I don't think they will this year either. Celtics in here Thursday. They're kind of falling apart, so that should be fun to watch. And
I
with the new
love it.
jerseys, yeah. Ricky J. Mark, follow him on Twitter. Thanks to Manny for producing. I'll be back tomorrow. We will talk more Heat tomorrow, unless the Dolphins do that thing today, in which case I'm going to have to talk about it. Otherwise, we'll be back to talk to Heat. And again, watch party tonight. Dangerous Minds Brewing. Free pizza, at least for I'm not buying pizzas all night, but I'm going to throw some pizzas out for people to
Man,
get there.
I want to be there so bad.
See if you can get there. See if you can get
I'm
there.
trying. Oh, it's busy. I got it. It's a busy day today.
Stop,
Well, we'll see.
stop by for an hour. We're going to be there till 11 o'clock. All right. Dangerous Minds Brewing, corner of U.S. Alex Toledo is driving up from South Keys, from Key West. He's driving all the way up tonight, and he can take you home in his Uber, okay, if you need it. So if that's the direction you need to go in. Dangerous Minds Brewing. And again, that's in the corner of Copins and Federal in Pompano. Plenty of free parking. Good day.